All right, folks. Well, good evening and welcome. This is the AIA East Bay. My name is Mike Wilson. I'm your executive director. Tonight we have a really great panel, and I just wanted to let everybody know. I'll put the brakes on that in a second. Just a couple rules of engagement tonight. So we've got people in the room, and we've also have people on the far end on Zoom. So for those of you who are on Zoom, please use the chat to ask questions during the Q&A period. For those of you in the room, our moderator Shiva will hand you a microphone. Try not to ask your question until you're holding this, I guess you call this the talking stick. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ken, who is the one of the leadership people on our JEDI or EDI committee. Ken?
Thank you, Mike. Hi, I'm Ken from HKIT Architect. AI East Bay JEDI Committee is delighted to have this first panel discussion. We have all the panelists. We have been thinking about what would be helpful for us and the East Bay member in terms of the equitable workspace and practices. With everyone's help, including like AIA California EDI Committee in the making, so here we are. And we're working on more programming, so please let us know if you have any thoughts or what topic we should focus on next. And I would like to thank you, our committee co-chair and then the members for making this event happen. So Cindy Busabende, which is our co-chair, and then Shivani, Maria, Derek, Megan, of course, and Cindy and Mike. So Shiva, it'll be stuck. Thanks.
Thank you. Fine. Sound check. Everybody can hear me okay? All right. Well, welcome. I'm Shiva Mendez. I'm the co-chair of Diversity Advisory Counter at HOK. I also am a practice leader for behavioral health at the firm. Here to moderate the conversation. So I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit and our effects at HOK and how we take on the DEI world is really looking at the three parts of our practice: our people, our clients, and our communities. And that's the buckets we put our efforts in through that. So a lot of staff development for our people, sustainability and equitable design for our communities, and looking at sustainability and designing for equity efforts for our clients. Why are we here today? I'm going to spend about 2 minutes on a sort of the state of the industry. The bottom line is that diverse workforce is more profitable, it is more empathetic, and it is good for business in attracting new talent and keeping that talent. We are architects, and although there are some general contractors and other companies in the room, we can't win the talent war by just adding the salaries alone. So we have to have the speaker. Okay, is that better? All right, thank you. So we have to provide good experiences for our, industrial community. AIA membership. As of last year, 23% of licensed architects or members of the AIA are women, and 18% are non-white. So we can do better. NCARB data shows that the new people who are coming to our industry are more diverse, an increasingly diverse group of folks. So 43% of new architects, new NCARB credentials are women, and the diversity is growing. Those in the application process are continuing to move the industry forward, and the color makeup is also increasing. Invariably, actually, those who are applying and going through the process are a lot of women of color. But what's not changing quite fast enough for all of us is sort of the pathway to recognition and leadership. So at the beginning of the careers, there's a lot more equity in the market. But as the caregiving years and as the career paths grow, that's where the dwindling happens. And of course, at the very tip top of our industry, the Pritzker winners and the gold medal winners are quite few and not representative of the body of the industry. So we have to do better. And part of how we do better is outreach earlier and earlier to introduce this industry and this career path to more people of various backgrounds. We have to do better about reducing the barriers to to licensure and career mobility. We have to deal with bias that's intricate in our work. And, this idea of you don't look like me, so you can't quite, that's what I mean by self-reflection. Yeah, we can't sort of just look at people who sort of do look like us as we go forward. We have to be open to that and have to avoid that trap of super tokens. We all know people who are, exceptional in their life, and that can't be the only people that can get through the barriers. So our communities deserve better. They need, our clients need to know that the buildings and the cities that we design for them, the future that we shape for them is coming from a diverse point of view and from people that looks like them and understand them. So that's why we're all gathered here today to talk about how the firms can get started on this path. So Denise, I'd like to you.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for having me here this evening. So my name is Denise Wint. I'm the non-architect on this table. So I am with EAH Housing. We're a nonprofit affordable housing developer in the states of California and Hawaii. I've been doing that for about 55 years. And so my foray into this conversation around DEI happened back in 2020 when there were conversations happening around with several developers in Southern California, and the question came up asking if anyone had heard of this organization that was threatening to sue developments that didn't have Black contractors on HUD-funded developments. And then that conversation escalated and elevated, and then I learned about the conversations that the Northern California Association of Nonprofit Housing has with their diversity and equity and inclusion that they've been having for countless years. And so that was pretty much my introduction, and hearing the topics happening, it opened my eyes again where it was, well, yes, it's obvious that there is a limited representation, particularly in the contracting world, where there are fewer owners that are people of color versus the workers. So it started an interesting conversation. And so in the subsequent questioning, I'll go into a little bit about the bill that ended up coming out of these conversations. It's the AB 2873, and it's about increasing diversity or diverse suppliers in the tax credit world when it comes to contracting for the projects that we are developing. So that's just a little bit about it in this nutshell. And so I have some photos here that Daniel was able to participate and some other architects, but we coordinated with the Nonprofit Association of Affordable Housing Development a few weeks ago, where we co-hosted a diversity supplier event. And it was a way of us being able to bring together different suppliers throughout the Bay Area to be able just more of a meet and greet and a mix and mingle. We were able to have great guest speakers present. The state treasurer Fiona Ma was in attendance, and she was able to speak. It was a really great first event for us to be able to see who else is in the space. And it was eye-opening to hear how many suppliers wanted to work in affordable housing, but never had the chance to. So we'll just continue that conversation. Thank you.
Jessica?
Is this one live?
Yes.
All right. Hello, I'm Jessica Jobsey, and I'm an architect and associate at Nolan Tam Architects. I've been there for coming up on 11 years. Nolan Tam has been around for 30 years, so I've been really happy to be there for kind of the latest third of their life as an organization. And my journey to the DEI conversation, I'd say it first began in about 2015, or the beginning of 2016 when AIA SF was going through their equity and architecture survey process. I see some people recognizing, and I was raised in the 90s and they're like, you can have it all. So I really wasn't aware how much the industry was still so skewed against women, and how much data there was to really back up that not only were women underrepresented, but that the barriers were at many points along the way. And then also out of that data came so much information about how other races in architecture besides white people were super underrepresented. So that was eye-opening to me, being raised in kind of a blinders on, it's all good kind of attitude. And then since then, learning more. The photo up here you can see is from Pathways to Equity program, which is a fellowship designed for design professionals by design professionals to really just provide tools and skill sets for bringing equity into the design practice. We'll talk about that more later, but yeah, Nolan Tam, I feel like my growth on this path has really also coincided with growth of the firm with Nolan Tam in their DEI efforts. So look forward to talking about that.
Hi, I'm Dan Perez. I am principal of and founder of Studio Perez. I've had my practice for 19 years, and it's been from just myself to 3 additional people on my staff in those years. And immediate past president for AI San Francisco. I've been serving on the board. This is my 9th year. And I came into the board service to do participation in committees. So my first stint was with the mentorship committee, and then into board service. I have been participating on the Latinx in architecture. We've changed recently committees to knowledge committees since 2013. And I am also this year was recruited to be the AIA California DEI, and this is an interesting conversation as well, EDI, the sort of changing of the letters. What is EDI? It's like, it's DEI. It's the same thing. So I am chair of that committee, and sort of just finding, getting my bearings on how we continue to push the conversations forward. I mean, Shiva, the statistics that you share show that we've made progress, but that work remains to be done. We all know of Whitney Young Jr. attending the 1968 AI conference, looking out at the sea of conference attendees and seeing a very homogeneous audience, and challenging the people in the room to diversify and be more representative of the society that is our world. And so the work does need to continue. It's how, I mean, I have sort of a very personal way of coming into DI because I am a person of color. So, coming up, I did my undergraduate at Arizona State, and I didn't see, even in Arizona, a lot of people that looked like me. There were 3 Latino people, and while it was diverse, I mean, in some ways, because we even had someone that was from a Polynesian island, for example, but we've very much been in this situation where we're like counting, the number of Black women architects, the number of Latina architects. For Black women, it's like 600 something. Latinas, we're 1.5%, 18% people of color. And people ask, when will it be enough, for this work? And I think we can reasonably say that it will be enough when the numbers in our profession match the demographic of our country. And for Latino people, that's 18% currently. We do find that you see those numbers in the school, but then there's a sharp drop off as people get into the profession. So I think one of the biggest issues is that there are economic barriers into this profession. We know that the business side of things in architecture needs a lot of work, and it is keeping people from joining. So my involvement with AI is to try to see, how not only as an individual, but finding like-minded people, we can actually make some positive change.
Thank you. Derek?
Hi, everyone. My name's Derek Davis. I'm a recent grad in architecture from UC Berkeley. At UC Berkeley, I was the vice president of the student chapter of NOMA, the National Organization of Minority Architects. And so we did a lot of work there. I have a few pictures of different outreach events and also student events where we bring in professionals from the field to sort of talk about things about equity and diversity in the fields. And really, I also have a little blurb there about the NOMA Future Faces Fellowship, of which I'm a recipient. And that's a fellowship that brings in students and recent grads into top firms across the country through NOMA as a way to help promote diversity upcoming in the fields. And so I'll kind of leave it at that. My intro into this is really just, I'm here to offer the student, recent grad, emerging professional perspective into what we're looking for in firms in terms of equity work and diversity initiatives, how we're looking at firms, how they're changing and introducing these initiatives. And so I'm here to offer that perspective for you all, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. So I have a sort of a starter question, and then we can sort of open up after that and see how much participation we're going to get. So you can go in whichever order you wish. How did you start and what steps did you take to begin the conversation at your workplace? So Dan, since you had a conversation with yourself, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, it really was that looking for the people that look like us. There's an article, "Where Are My People?" That was written several years back, and my participation in LEA, I think, really sort of helped strengthen and promote this commitment to thinking about, rather than just saying like, I recognize I'm like the only person in the room, saying I actually have potential to change this. And this is where I've gotten more involved in advocacy. So I'm wearing my Marsha Maiden buttons today, get shit done. And I don't know if we're allowed to swear, but more joy, less bullshit. And it's important, I think, that each of us as individuals can accomplish some amount of work, but that when you find people that you can actually make more of an impact. And so my work with LEA, it had been founded in 2013, probably a little bit earlier. And the co-chairs, there were two co-chairs that founded it, and they have very much felt like they were not able to pass the baton. And here was 2019, in the sort of the deepest, darkest times of like terrible rhetoric nationally with the politics. And they were like, we're just gonna shut down. And a colleague and I, Patricia Alarcon, I was like, no, we cannot. This is too important for this work. When the types of attacks are being made on your person because of who you are, or the color of your skin, because of your immigrant status. We thought, we really do have to just hunker down and make a commitment to keep these efforts moving forward. And so we did something called Leah Reboot, and we were all in pandemic world by 2020. But one of the silver linings about the pandemic is that you were able to get people from all over the country and all parts of the world. And so we had this like Christmas online festival, and we made outreach to all the Leah Texas chapters. We had met some groups in Chicago, Arquitectos en Argentina, people doing similar work in and outside of AIA. And just seeing that like virtual room fill up with more than 200 people, it was such an amazing experience for people to be like, we just didn't even know like how many people are out there. And it's really led to such amazing opportunities. So last year, our Leah San Francisco committee started the future of Latinx in architecture. And we decided that this was not going to be a one-off, but we invited all those advocacy groups or those groups that are doing work in and outside of AIA to come and be part of a panel discussion. This year in the AIA 24 conference in DC, we were able to rope in a committee called La Idea in DC and expanded to a working panel or a panel discussion and a workshop. And we were able to get a 2-hour program that was an event, 200 people signed up. And it was a really great conversation. But it's given us this opportunity to think about, keeping to up the ante. So we're already organizing for Boston in 25 and hoping to get local participants to keep the participation moving forward, that conversation moving forward. So
Great. And Jessica, how did you have the conversation started at Nolan Town?
Luckily, it was not, I just want to say I absolutely didn't do it alone. And I think what you said about community, knowing that you're not doing it alone is just so key. But Nolan Tam's a little bigger. We're in the time that I've been there between about 35 and 45 and in between as things flow. But the community aspect of the work has always been part of Nolan Tam. Their motto is uncommon spaces for the common good. So the sense of working for the common good has been a part of it for a long time. It's been woman-owned since the beginning. So, and the staff balance just organically has been over 65% female for years, closer to 70 right now. And even in leadership, it's 65% in principal and associate principal level. So, so it was well primed. And I would say that it was collective effort, but that equity by design or the missing 32%, that project was actually the firm leadership invited people into the firm to talk about that research. So it was growing. And then in 2018, the firm sponsored me to participate in the Pathways to Equity Fellowship, and then, which we can talk about in more detail separately. And so I was kind of like an ambassador into that, and then bringing information back to the firm, working with the firm, doing, workshops, and then the firm leadership, 3 of the principals took the Pathways to Equity Fellowship. And then in 2020, when we were all in lockdown and all witnessing the really heartbreaking murders that were so public of Black people. Sorry, feeling emotional today. Yeah, it was heartbreaking. And I'll take a breath.
Take a breath.
I feel very lucky that our leadership has stepped up and said, you know what, we have to be explicit. We can't just talk about social equity as kind of a neutralized term that eliminates the realities of race, of gender, of physical ability. You know, we have to stop washing over it and get really specific. So, so then we did some searching within the leadership, trying to figure out how to move forward. And because we had this relationship with Pathways to Equity, we brought them in for entire firm specific training to, you know, to talk through what, you know, getting common language, getting, doing some work on the personal side, and then, you know, preparing to do work on the outside as well, and trying to set up measurements for accountability. And so we can talk about that some more in the specific Q&A, but yeah, it was kind of a long journey of kind of ramping up, and then the pivot point in 2020 was really just that, you know, we have to remove the racial aspect from the taboo and put it into open conversation.
Denise, you wanna?
Sure. You know, it's hearing these types of conversations, I think, really allowed me to be in that safe space. And EAH is a great organization. I mean, I've been there a little over 5 years. And my initial foray into speaking about race, and it's the first time I've worked with at a large firm. I've come from Southern California, working at smaller firms, no more than 10 folks working at the whole organization. And so there was an event that I was invited to, and the treasurer and the deputy treasurer at the time were speaking to Black developers in Southern California. And I went up to them at that time and said, you need to do this in the Bay Area. They're like, all right, we'll put something together. And I was like, I don't know any, I just moved up here 6 months ago. I don't know anyone. Anyway, fast forward, was able to put something together in about 48 hours, and all these Black developers came out, and I was like, wow, I have never seen this at all. And then it wasn't just Black developers, but it was developers of color in the Bay Area. And so many people were able to come out, and it was refreshing for me to see, but I just never have seen anything like that before. And so then fast forward to 2020, and we're at home not knowing what the heck is going on in the outside world. You see these murders happening on TV. And then the question came up about being sued. So it's like, we're already having difficulty with affordable housing. Now we're going to be threatened with these lawsuits. And it was, what's the conversation? What are we doing? And so because I had the space safe with leadership at EAH to do this event with the Black developers, I just asked the question. I asked our chief real estate development officer, and we would have these conversations. The CEO is always open. She's like, yes, we absolutely need to do more. So I know it was knowing that I was in an environment where I could have the conversation. I have never been afraid or shy to speak with leadership. If this is my CEO, I'm like, I'll go to Jessica, like, what are we doing? Or, I never had that difficulty. Speaking with you one-on-one, I may have a difficulty, but just, having that leadership or the hierarchy, I was never afraid. So I think that's just pretty much how the conversation started. And it just allowed us to, and I'm just glad to say, even 4 years later, that we're still having the conversation. So it didn't end. And I was able to bring it up not only to our organization, but to other peers or friends who I have in the industry, and they were able to chime in and have other conversations, and we were able to bring it to a regional wide session over the course of 1.5 years in Southern California, where we were able to bring in contractors or a design team or developers to talk about what is it that we're not doing, what do we need to do. And on one panel, I never forget, the small business panel, one woman in the room, she said, the way you could add to the conversation is look around in the room. and see who's missing. So she said, in our space, children are missing. So now you could see like, oh yes, we don't have children in this space. So that's what I need to do as an individual, is just look around in the space and see who is not here, who needs to be a part of the conversation. And that's what we've been doing since.
Derek, and my career is new, but maybe as a NOMA's representative at school, how did you start those conversations, or how are you thinking you would start this conversation at the new workplace?
Yeah, so I guess I can think about it like this. Yeah, I am very new into the career, but where I just recently started an internship. And as I mentioned, the NOMA Future Faces Fellowship, I think I'm very excited about starting to have those conversations at that firm I'm interning at. And it's also really nice that coming through that fellowship, that firm partner with NOMA, having that as a starting place is a great way that I know I can sort of have an avenue into that conversation, because in partnering with NOMA with that fellowship, what that firm is saying or making a statement about is this commitment to increasing the diversity in the field. And while I can't just stop there, making a commitment and then just kind of saying we did our part, it is a great place to start, I think. And so as I'm moving forward, I'm happy to see that in the place I'm working at right now, and I'm looking forward to having those conversations as I move forward.
All right. Before I open it to the room, I will make sure that we address the AB 873. I'm a little dyslexic, so
It's
I
okay.
have to double check. So that if you can briefly tell us what that law is about. And
Sure, if you could go back to my slide. Yeah. So in this slide, I provided the simplest definition. It's intended to increase supplier and contractor participation in the development of low-income housing tax credit projects by women, minority, disabled veteran, and LGBT business enterprises. That's pretty much it in its nutshell. There was research that's published with the state tax credit agency every year. You get to see how much it costs to develop affordable housing. We see 60% of our budget goes towards that, but we know the representation as far as ownership and the supply or the vendors that participate in our world is limited. And so that was part of the conversation. That was part of the conversation that started this assembly bill. It was, again, in 2020, moving along with these topics. There's limited representation. We need to increase the supplier diversity. We just need to increase suppliers in general because it is getting more and more expensive. But we know that there is a large segment of the population that's working in multifamily or just being in these spaces that is not being afforded the opportunity. So that's pretty much
specific benchmarks. Time or
so there is a sunset, I believe it's 2029 this year. So if your project was awarded any state tax credits in 2020, what year are we in? 2024. Thank you. You do have to start reporting in 2025. So January 1. And so at least with EAH, we have 3 projects that started construction at the beginning of the year. So we're saying we at least need to start tracking. We have another development that was awarded tax credits a few months ago, which we know would have to be part of the report in next year. So that's now going to be a new conversation. And what does that look like in our contracts? How, we can't state goals, but we could at least define what our intention is. And it is to increase. And so there will be some reporting requirements that we will be looking to the general contractor and whomever it is that's working on our team to supply that information, because the state then is required and mandated to publish these findings.
You're welcome. So, how are we doing in the room? Anybody has a burning question that wants to ask?
How do you keep firms accountable to meeting their motivation to really be diverse in their community? And the JUST program was effective at Northam. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Thanks. Perfect. I promise I did not plant Ursula in the audience. I do have a slide. So she self-planted. No, it's so the JUST program is part of the Living Futures Institute. They're the same people who bring you the Living Building Challenge, well building certifications. And this applies, it's kind of, they call it like nutrition label for firms equity. And it's not specifically for architecture firms, it's across industries. And Nolan Tam started using this as kind of a third-party benchmark that we could begin using to kind of operationalize some of the goals. So there's specific, it's a little bit like filling out, lead applications or other like well building, that they have categories, they define what the goal is, and then you write, either provide metrics in the case of, workforce diversity or, gender diversity, racial diversity, but some of them are softer. Some of them are, writing out a narrative of how you're going to address certain things. And we at Nolan Tam started this in 2018 to receive our first certification in 2019, and it goes on a 2-year cycle of renewal. So we set targets of improving in at least one category each time we re-up. And we've used it to actually look at, okay, what are common practices that we could adopt so that we could, have benchmarks for improving. And they have actually led to areas where we've decided to change policy due to understanding this framework. Policies that we've changed include, we now have like employee volunteer hours that are afforded to us that we can, spend working time to go do volunteering. We have, we've changed, partly due to this, we've changed the way we have an internship program where we now have a rolling internship program of 4 different seasons of internships because the pipeline is so much of the struggle of like, we need to be supporting and mentoring people as early as we can. And specifically reaching out to not just, we're right down the road from Berkeley, so we had previously had such a relationship with Berkeley or sometimes Cal Poly, but now we're specifically outreaching to community colleges, going further afield, looking for people who might be overlooked in the process. I've gotten down a rabbit hole. But we, in a nutshell, the process is something we're kind of familiar with from filling out things like lead applications, but it's a good way to kind of push yourself, and it's led to policy change. So that can be found at livingfutures.org.
And we are providing the recording as well as the slide deck and the resources at the end for everybody. So you don't have to snapshot or picture or anything like that. Mike, do we have questions online? I don't open yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Oh. All right. Anybody else in the audience?
I have a question. I don't think I'll need the microphone. Maybe though.
It's for those online.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Not for us.
Awesome. I have a question for you. You mentioned something really interesting, Daniel, about looking around the room and finding that connection amongst the people maybe who look like you. And I love your counterpoint to that is looking around the room and seeing who's not there. I think that's wonderful, right? Both of those hand in hand create a beautiful picture of what a room could look like. Well, let's say that room is really full. And that room looks very representative and similar to what you want it to look like. What are the things that you can suggest that you can do so that all those people in that room feel seen, feel acknowledged, feel appreciated, and feel celebrated? Any ideas that you have would be really appreciated.
Sure, I'll start. Just as part of my board participation, we've with AI San Francisco, we've been very intentional about the board makeup. And we want it to be diverse in terms of firm size, gender, ethnicity, race, sexual orientation. And I'm very proud when I look at what we've been able to do and continue to do with our board makeup. And that conversation has come up about like thinking about who is not in the room. So I think it's very much still a work in progress where we can always sort of start to think of the folks that aren't in the room at the event that we had at conference this past week, the Latinx. We had folks that were Filipino or Arabic come to the room because they're also underrepresented. It's what I like seeing, with what NOMAS is doing. And there's another organization at Berkeley, that's at the Chicano Architecture Student Association. And Leah has partnered with them to provide help raise funds for scholarships for underrepresented students. And even though it's a Chicanx founded organization, there are young Indian students and Asian students that it's a need-based scholarship program. So the person that founded this, his philosophy is that everyone gets something. And so I think just thinking about, expanding our view, because ultimately there is always going to be, I think, even when we've made progress for Latinx folks and for Blacks and for Asians, there are going to be the smaller groups that are still not in the room. There was a resolution at the conference that asked to expand our definition of groups that are thought about, and that is people with disabilities. And the motion did pass. It's interesting to hear both sides of the debate, because we do have that as part of our sort of overall code of ethics for AIA, but this would bring it to our strategic plan. And I think that's actually a good idea because, if you're thinking strategically about what you want to make, be the change that you want to see, that you have to think about it in terms of the future, like what more you can do. There are people that are economically disabled. And so I think taking that sort of more expansive view for including as many people as you can is what we should be doing.
Yeah, I think I could respond to that too, just because I think it's an interesting question. I think in having these conversations, your kind of framework of starting from this place of, the room looks like how you want it to look, and you have that representation. It interests me because I guess I haven't looked at it from that perspective before, I guess just because the room hasn't been that and haven't gotten there. Yeah. But I mean, I still think it's interesting, and I think when I heard your question, what I thought was really that what comes after the representation is action. And because it's great and necessary to have the profession reflect the communities that we're designing for, and just society at large. What also needs to happen is action in the profession, whether it's specifically with the types of projects that we're doing, or just how we're conducting our work. But there's more than just the representation. And I think once you have that, a way to celebrate it and to promote it and use that value that you've created by creating a representative workplace and a representative community is then to use those people to further make a more equitable field, a more equitable society at large. And so that's kind of how I'm thinking about your question.
Jessica, there's a follow-up question on your JUST certification. Adrian's asking why your scores went down on the supply chain.
Someone's paying attention.
On the spot.
Excellent.
Yeah, on the
No,
spot.
that's such a good catch. Well done, online participants. So the reason is we actually removed it. We had been shoehorning a narrative in about supply chain. It was written for manufacturing. Like what we supply is actually a service. And so we decided that strategically, like we were going to stop trying to shoehorn ourselves into a definition. So that was a conscious decision.
Amazon was like,
yeah, I mean, there are things about there are other sections that better addressed it, like sourcing local, when we do procure, food and services and various things, that are we procuring it locally or from, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, etc. So we were covering it in other areas, and so it was kind of more of a clerical thing.
for that.
I thought maybe that's how it could apply, and like, that's not what it did to.
Oh, right. And
Should I repeat that? Okay. What about teaming with consultants, and how did that fit in with JUST? Because I thought that maybe could apply to supply chain. Yeah. Or
I think so. That's actually a topic we think about a lot when we're looking at pursuits. We compete for most of our projects because we do mostly public work. So we really try hard to build relationships and lasting relationships with the consultants that we work with, and so we have been looking to diversify that. I will admit I'm not part of the committee that does the fine tuning of the JUST report, but we probably address it in a different section, or it's not addressed very well, but it within the JUST framework, because it's not written for architecture firms specifically, but it is something that we do think about. And ways that we try to expand our reach is checking in regularly with, like, City of Oakland has really good registries. Some cities have good registries of who's registered as a minority-owned business, women-owned business, small local business enterprise. As Denise probably knows, some of the smaller firms even have a hard time getting registered as those, so it's hard to find. So we're also trying to build relationships, like getting more involved with NOMA, and really just having relationship-based kind of expansion. And then once we find people that we find good values alignment, we try to build long working partnerships.
Oh, what's happening?
A calendar.
I don't know who's driving. There we go.
Oh, boy.
Okay, let's see what we have. We've had some questions here. I can figure out how to scroll.
So Derek, I wondered what percentage of importance it was for you when you were finding a new place to work, because as some of us that work in firms and, have recruited over the years, and, trying to be more sensitive to, being more diverse, how important was it for you to find a firm that reflected kind of some of your efforts that you've been doing at school?
Yeah, so I don't know if I have a percentage or anything, but I can say when I'm thinking about diversity efforts and equity work in firms, it is very important to me personally. And really, I think why that is and what it comes down to is simply that I do want to work for a firm that aligns with my beliefs and values, simply because, and I hear this from a lot of students as well and a lot of professionals, that's where my goals come from, both personal and professional. And so if I'm at a firm that does not align with certain values and certain beliefs, then they're not going to be working towards my goals. And of course, you want to be working at a place that helps you reach your goals. And so for me, what that means, I want to see work towards increasing diversity in the profession. And I'm also really interested in equity work being done by firms. And so for the place I'm at right now, the big push was just that the avenue coming in through the NOMA fellowship. I really like the connection there and liked going through NOMA. And as I continue, what I'm really looking for in future workplaces and other firms is I'm looking at how they're treating diversity within their firm. So in the firm, in the employees, in the leadership especially. And then I'm also looking at equity initiatives and what type of work they're doing. And so it's pretty high up for me just because it's about my personal and professional goals, and it really aligns there. And so it's pretty high.
Could I just add, I mean, I'm really happy to see this shift. When I got my start, one of the first jobs that I took in the interview, the human resources person said to me, "Oh, your last name's Perez. That's you're a minority, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yes." And I was like, "Oh, good, you'll help us meet our quota." And while I don't think there was any, anything malignant, it's just that sort of mindset of like, filling quotas. We've come a long way. I hope.
That's why the I matters. Not just counting, the inclusion part.
Right,
matters.
exactly.
So there's a question here, and I'm not sure who would be able to answer it best. Any of the firms or companies have a panel that have employee resource groups, so I'm assuming affinity groups type of thing established, and how successful has that been? You guys have affinity groups?
Well, I'm just going to talk about it. I don't want to take all the space, but what Leah are doing, what Leah is doing, and NOMA, I think, provides this opportunity. One of the conversations that we're having with Leah is establishing a national affinity group. And that's very much sort of in the works in terms of how we'll approach it. But I think it's important to have those sorts of opportunities outside of the workplace, like the mentorship committee, where people, I think, feel more at ease. The workspace, I think, provides different sorts of opportunities, but maybe that really lends itself to larger firms, more so than say like medium or small firms.
Yeah. Even at a large firm, it's difficult because sort of office by office, across company, it's difficult to create that sort of sense of connection.
Yeah.
So we've had some started and not very well, not a lot of traction. So I think the industry groups, as you said, are a lot more successful in creating that bandwidth and sort of the idea exchange that then people can bring to the firm.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add that there's also in the works with AI California, there is called Culture Shift Pledge. And there's some information on it now, and anyone that's interested should get involved in. But it's just sort of the idea of from a broader perspective, creating a workspace that is healthy, where you value every employee and give every employee equal opportunity. And our profession needs help wherever it can get it in the business setting, because I think what I feel optimistic about is that this does sort of then create, I think, a pathway or a template that people can use to, help spur or make adjustments in their firm in terms of how they think about things.
Yeah, one of the best conversations I've had over time is this idea of, looking at a prospective employee, whether they fit your culture or add to your culture. And we have to shift from that, fitting into our culture as to, being a value add. So the second part of that question is, any of the firms or companies have an official program to transition underrepresented individuals into leadership positions? And audience can answer too if you're here.
Yeah, I'd like to hear the audience answer that. Ursula.
I guess, well, EH, we don't have, to my knowledge, a formal leadership program to transition underrepresented individuals into that space. We do internally have leadership training opportunities for those who are in leadership positions. And I think from the representation that EAH has in its leadership slots now helps, when Derek says, I am looking to see who is in these positions, it helps a lot, because what EAH had looked like when I had started is very different now. And so executive leadership and mid-level leadership are participating in our diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So it's a lot of this internal conversations, just being vulnerable, which working in a professional environment, depending on the space that you're in, is not something that we do. We do not get personal. And so it is good to hear different individuals speak about their career or their why of being able to participate in the space, or their why for working at EAH. And so because folks are able to see a diverse group of individuals that is leading the organization and where they know that they are being heard, I think as part of that, it helps to have lower level staff or new folks coming in to say, yes, I want to be able to be in that space because I see you. And when Cindy had asked the question to Derek, I'm starting to get more of those questions where prospects are saying they are looking to our organization because they see the change. And it's not the same at other firms where they could say, I feel comfortable speaking to you because you are a Black woman or a woman of color or a woman, and I don't see that in the real estate development space, which is very, very different. So we don't have a formal program to transition under individuals into leadership, but we will receive the training ourselves. And then I know for me with my team, if there is any opportunity, any engagement, I do recommend my team to participate in that. There's AREP, there's Real, there are a lot of these minority groups that are starting from these professional in these professional networking space. So for example, Real, is real estate. I don't remember what it's called, but it's, but I sent it out, and one of my teammates, who is from Venezuela, she's like, oh my God, Denise, I didn't know these organizations existed. She's like, I'm going to this. And so, and I've shared in the previous panel, I do not have to look like the organization that's represented. Like, I've been invited to be a part of the Cambodian Association. When I was in undergrad, I was a part of every organization, Café con Leche, Nikkei, I was there because I'm like, I love learning about people. And so I think just taking that and bringing it into my working space allows that, the conversation and the level of comfort for folks to be able to say, I want that. So even though the organization doesn't have it established internally, we know that there are resources I'm learning about now that they could tap into.
I'm going to ask a question. I think a lot of the AIA members are small businesses, so I'm going to ask Dan to talk a little bit about sort of barriers for the, entry to, pursuit and winning work, as well as how you manage to do all of this extracurricular work, being the founder and owner.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's definitely no shortage of challenges. But yeah, I um, I mean, as a small business owner, I think we all take sort of different pathways. I worked for small and medium-sized firms to get my start, and I was always wearing different hats at those types of firms. So that gave me the opportunity to do work looking at contracts and going out for interviews and then doing the actual work. And that gave me uh, some sense that, oh, I'm ready to start my firm, along with a little bit of naivete. But I just think about how I started. I very much thought of it as I was doing public education work, and I was able to get some work from that. So I think part of it is, just you're figuring out, what type of work you're going to pursue, and then building up the credibility. And then there continue to be challenges because even with small business designation, and I'm hopeful about this last AV bill, but we'll see if the talk actually works its way into an actual walk, because it's good to put something down on paper, but how those goals are actually achieved is so important. I think sort of one of the personal struggles, and I hear other small businesses say this, is that there are small business set-asides for firms, and there's percentage participation that one of the challenges can be that the agency takes 90 days to pay the bills. So that would be a struggle for a small firm. And as it is, I have clients that are taking a long time to pay, and it have had to say, I'm not a bank. And so I think it's so important as a small business owner, and looking for those opportunities to educate yourself with business. I don't think everyone's going to go out and start their own business, but or want to pursue an MBA. But again, this is, I think, one of the biggest things that this profession needs to improve is, and it's starting at the schools, is there's one professional practice class, is giving young people the tools to understand that this profession actually is a business. Yes, there's the beautiful work that we do. I know it's shocking.
It broke the bubble. It just broke that bubble for us.
But ultimately, you have to pay the bills and keep doing the work. So again, there's no shortage of challenges. I think it's just trying to figure out the type of work that you're going to pursue. And I've pursued public education work in multifamily housing. I do a lot of affordable housing for nonprofits, but the bulk of it has been rehabilitation work. Breaking into a new construction has been a challenge because of some of those reasons that I mentioned. There's a set aside, but then they want you to have a staff of 10 people. The definition of small business is expansive. It's right. Depending on what lens is being taken. And we saw this during the pandemic where, a small business was, when people were applying for the PPP loans, could be 500 people. And, it depends on the,
compared to Walmart, we're all small,
yeah.
right?
So, I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, it is possible, though. I think some people decide to go into the arena of saying, I'm going to specialize in single family residential, and people make it that way. My approach has been different, and I've been the small firm trying to have a diverse portfolio of work. to try to make myself more recession proof. But it's still it's constant challenge.
Yep. Okay, let's see, we have a couple more questions. Which firms of the panelists look at leaders in DEI when establishing their own programs? So Nolan, Tim, did you guys look at what other people are doing and sort of?
Yeah, I'd say through participation in things like the Equity by Design for a while was having seminars and forums, and Smith Group, Rosa Sheng from Smith Group was a super enthusiastic pioneer in that area. So for sure we looked across the industry at other various AIA groups. Some put out white papers, so we cast our net wide looking for good inspiration. And then, kind of filter all of that information and find what feels authentic to us, but also you have to keep an attitude of curiosity and open-mindedness, that there's always something to learn, so yeah, we're often looking. Smith Group is who comes to mind because of my early intros through Rosa Sheng.
Anyone else want to take that on? Derek, did you look around as you?
Yeah, I've definitely looked around. Yeah, I would say I don't have a particular firm I want to hold up on the pedestal or anything. But I think as you look around, you do, especially larger firms, they do start to have a lot of initiatives and a lot of work that it seems to be being done towards promoting diversity in the fields. And it's really, I mean, for me, when I see that, I think that's great. And what I look for then is really just kind of the follow through and just making sure that it's actually happening, right? And so I think, like we mentioned earlier, talking about, there might be a diverse firm, but then looking at the leadership, for example, if it's not making it up to the leadership, there's a disconnect there. There's an issue. But really, that's kind of how I approach it. Because a lot of firms now, they do put it out there, and that's great. And it's just really looking for the follow through, because the action has to be there.
Anybody in the real estate market? You wanna?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I am constantly looking at, for those who are doing best practice, or what are their lessons learned, because we are expanding, even though we're a large firm and may have been engaged in this conversation for some years. There are other professionals out there that this is their life's work, and they're hired by some of these larger firms. I mean, Mid-Penn has a dedicated staff person that works on this. Eden Housing has dedicated staff. Saha has dedicated staff. And then there are smaller firms, for example, in Southern California, my previous employer, Innovative Housing Opportunities, the CEO, she was intentional about that work. And she also has a design background. And she's like, if we are going into a particular community, the team needs to look like that community. And so it wasn't a written statement, but it was her intention. And so I was able to make that transition into the work that I do, and just seeing how EAH2 knows, just from our board representation, for example, and the board is also involved in these conversations. They too are looking at who's missing in this space and what other firms are doing. So there's a lot of lessons that we could learn from each other, because we're in so many different stages. Love to be able to get to where Jessica's group is, but we just started the conversation, and it's, we're a big cruise ship, really, like trying to turn and having these conversations, and it really started with the individuals. So absolutely, we do look at other firms, and that's just a few that I've mentioned. But NPH has its DEI working group, and if you're a member of NPH, you could participate in this. We meet, I think, the 3rd or 4th Mondays. And we have representation from the development firm and from the architect firm. So, these are some of the places that I'm able to hear, like, what language are you using in your contracts, or how are you putting your goals together, or your, how are you putting your goals together? What language is appropriate? And what are some of the potential pitfalls if we move forward with certain initiatives? So yeah, This is a space to be able, as we were sharing or learned earlier about being in community. We cannot do this by ourselves, and we don't need to be, it's not a time to be greedy or selfish. Like, it is the time to be able to learn from others and take what they're doing and expand on that.
I was just gonna add, I attended a event at Gensler about a month ago called Strive 45. Yeah, it was a really interesting conversation on equity, diversity, and inclusion, because you are having a lot of pushback now, whether it's through laws. There have been 85 laws that have been positioned to counter EDI initiatives, primarily in the higher education, and 12 of those bills have passed. The governor of Alabama has banned some terms like Latinx. It was really a great presentation in terms of what Gensler's doing. You think, of Art Gensler, who actually started as a sole practitioner and then built this firm that is one of the largest in the world. What they're doing now is really looking within their ranks to start promoting young people, the underrepresented groups, and helping them, bringing them up, mentoring them. And I think, we all need to do that, whether small, medium, or large. I think of that when I hire someone, that I'm not only their employee, the idea that, our profession was set up as apprentice, where we bring apprentices on, is that the idea of guiding a person's career, and mentoring them to help them achieve better things. And I think that I like to think of why I'm doing what I'm doing is not to make it easier for those that come behind me, but that they can be better informed, that there will be less hurdles or barriers for them to have to go through than what I had to go through, or others have had to go through to make it in this profession.
I appreciate your comment about apprenticeship, but what strikes me is, to really have diversity in our profession, we have to go back to when people are young adults, when they're making decisions about their career. And when I was at school, there was no topic called architecture. And as far as I know, apart from a few select schools in the Bay Area, I don't know if architecture is even taught in high schools. So our call to action could be, as professionals, that we're out in the schools a lot more, exciting people about the possibilities of this as a career. That's one thing, that we could be out there. Another thing is, it's an expensive career. When you go to college, it's an expensive commitment to make, and that's not a privilege for everybody. So if somehow, we can be advocating that there are membership programs or scholarships to really bring diverse students into the schools and then encourage them going out, So I feel that's a financial burden. It's a big deal. So I think
I'd fully agree. NCARB invited all these Latinx advocacy groups to sit in on a listening session this last Saturday in DC. And they were all ears. They're like, we want to know what your pinch points are. So there were the Immigrants Action Coalition, there, the Argentina, people from Arquitectos, the LEA chapters throughout the country. It was meant to be a 2-hour session, but it turned into like a 3.5-hour session. So much of it was, the economic barriers, and how to navigate those. Again, there's a lot of work that we need to do with the business side of things, so that this actually becomes a profession that people can afford to practice, because I think that is definitely one of the reasons people shift out of this profession.
It's not only expensive education, it is a return on investment is questionable.
Right.
So I want to be respectful of our time. I have a pragmatic question that I want to ask the panel, and that is from Ina, I think, and said, it's very hard to sort of, without the HR resources of a large firm or EDI panel or a tax group, how do you balance the employees' workload, their, actual billable work, and these types of activities? And is there like a set number of hours that you budget, or a certain number of, amount of money that you, allocate to this, to these types of initiatives, so that people can follow them and sort of, bring those ideas to work? And how is it going to be done within the 40-hour work week? I'm not quite sure Nina works in architecture firms. I should not be, following the bad habits of our predecessors, but yeah. So anybody wants to take that on?
Jessica.
Okay. So, yeah, to address the last part first, fitting it within the 40 hours, that's very hard. But I will say that I have been lucky enough that Nolan Tam has been willing to allow for certain amounts of working time to be put towards these initiatives. I think I forgot to mention it, but so I'm currently the chairperson of our DEI committee. That committee is kind of like given the go-ahead from the firm, and we can use our work time to have committee meetings to move things forward. But I do think that a lot of it, like for example, the Pathways to Equity Fellowship was an outside of working time commitment. It was on weekends, it was after work. And the passion in the community keeps me going. But yeah, it's just so hard, because I know that especially for like Derek, for your generation, this concept of actually your career is a part of your life, but it should not be your entire life. And forgive me if I'm generalizing, but I'm hearing this a lot. It is hard to balance it all, but I will say that the community aspect of it is energizing. So that even when I would be looking at, the end of a work week, and then on Saturday, I'd have to get up early and go to the Pathways to Equity, I'd feel a little bit of dread on Friday night. But then once I was there with like-minded people who are so passionate, I found that to be energizing. And you mentioned the where are my people? And I realized, for anyone who can't see me visually, I am a very normative white woman. I'm, if you were to say, find an average looking white woman, that's me. But two things to say about that. I'm not looking for people who look like me, but I'm looking for people who care about equity. And I'm recognizing also, just this is off topic, but I want to say it, that white supremacy was built by people who defined what whiteness is, and we need white people to help take it apart. So I'm willing to do some more of that committee work, because we shouldn't put all of this burden on the people who are the underrepresented groups, who are struggling, who are, trying to just be seen in the world. And so, I'll make mistakes, but I try to learn and I try to put in the work. And the original question was, how do you make time for it? Our firm is medium, I would say, and it really makes such a big difference to have just leadership buy-in. And if you are a person who's trying to figure out how to start it in your firm and you don't know if you yet have leadership buy-in, I'd say start building a cohort. Don't do it alone. Start building a cohort of people who you can gather support internally, and then maybe work your way up the power structure to see if you can get leadership buy-in, because it makes the world of difference.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. I think with the EDI work that you did, the solution is with all of us. It's also with the 65% white male demographic of this, and so we cannot disenfranchise people. I think we need to say, you can help us do this, and we should all be working on it together.
So I have a final question for everyone in the room. As a member of the EDI JEDI committee with Ken and some of the folks that are here, this is our kind of our first attempt at starting some discussion within AIA in quite a while anyway, I should say. And so if anybody has any ideas about other or specific topics they would like to discuss or have, panelists, we'd love to hear it. So shoot us an email, let Mike or Sydney know, but we'd like to keep this going. So what's the next iteration of topics and questions? Just food for thought.
I think I didn't follow it up with, if we're going to be including, we're looking at inclusion, right? We can agree that that's very important. What I would love to talk about is what that really looks like for your team, because one of the things I'm seeing right now is part of the team doesn't necessarily want to be acknowledged. And, I'm listening really carefully, and I love what you've all contributed to, but I would like to talk about practically what does that look like so people feel seen, acknowledged, appreciated in a way that's meaningful for them.
I have a couple of future topics of discussion which are kind of broad and probably require another hour and a half of discussion. I'm really interested in two specific issues. The first is introducing immigrant professionals into architecture. And I mean, we're not just technical people, we're people who come with life experiences, and you learn more about architecture and society growing up wherever you grew up than you did in school. And so sort of transplanting those professionals at whatever stage, and with the expectation that they will fit in, understand, and innovate in a new society. It's a specific kind of challenge. So I'm very curious about how leaders and firms plan to address that issue or opportunity, I would say. The other big topic is how do you get young moms to stay? So
Are we at time? I think at 7:30. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to our panels. Thank you for all of you online. And this is the inaugural JEDI panel discussion. So I appreciate everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.